Hi, welcome to the Ambient iPad. Let's make some music. This is the 50th jam I've posted, so I'm going to do things a little different this time. I've got some questions to answer, and in between that, I'll do some jamming on the Mellotron. So the most prevalent question I get, it's some variation on the theme of, why would you spend so much money on a hardware Mellotron when you can get an iOS app or a set of samples for a lot less money? Fair question. I personally like the whole package. I've been a fan of the Mellotron since I was a kid. There was no way I was ever going to buy one or afford one then, and now they're still extremely expensive. You have to deal with the tapes. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies with the mechanics of it, the motor, the voltage, and it's heavy. So that really isn't something that interests me. What I like about the modern Mellotron is you get uncompressed samples from the original master tapes of all the original Mellotron models and the Chamberlain models. There's one sample per key. So instead of some sample sets, they map the samples across multiple notes. Certainly the iOS apps are the same way. If you're just looking to use some Mellotron sounds occasionally, then that's certainly a more economical way to go. But I use the Mellotron as the centerpiece of the music that I do. I also use it as a controller. This wasn't made by a big company like Roland or Yamaha or Korg. A lot of high quality parts made in small batches. So yeah, it's going to be a little more expensive. But when you compare it to other synthesizers and keyboards, they're not too cheap either. So from my perspective, again, I like the interface. You get the knobs, you get a lot of the same types of immediate interaction that you would get on the original Mellotron. But yeah, it's samples. You're not using tapes, and that's something that you need to keep in mind. The other question is typically around, hey, you could spend $30 to get more realistic sounds like horns or strings. Yes, I'm not looking for accurate representations or recreations of the real instruments. I'm looking for an accurate representation and recreation of the Mellotron. So I've always liked that kind of oddness that you get with the Mellotron sounds. They're very unique. And you're not going to find those anywhere else. So yeah, you can take samples of real instruments and dirty them up a little. The Mellotron itself has a number of features to make it sound older, and I have a video out there where I do run through the ways you can use the settings on the Mellotron to make it sound like an older one. I'll have a link to that video in the description. All right, let me do some jamming here. For today, I'm going to stick with some real classic stock sounds from the Mellotron M400. I'm going to use the violins, and I'm going to use the cello. For this first jam, I'm going to use the M400 violins. So the signal chain is what I typically use. We've got the Mellotron M4000D Mini. I'm using its mono master analog output. It also has two direct outputs for each of the two instruments that you can use, and that enables you to process those differently. Since I'm processing them the same, I'm just going to use the one mono output. That goes into a Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 interface, which communicates back and forth with an iPad Pro through a USB-C hub that also lets me power the iPad Pro at the same time. I use a lot of different apps on the iPad, and I use that as the central part of my music making. For the Mellotron and a lot of other things I do, like the bass videos that I've posted as well, I'm really using this for effects and for recording. So right now I'm using Mixbox for effects and 8 Matrix to record it. I also use GarageBand, I use Cubasis 3, and a whole host of other effect apps. I also use synth apps as well and drum machines, and there's a bunch of videos posted that use those as well. All right, let's do a jam. The next question is kind of around how I got to the Mellotron, how I started doing music. That would take way too much time than I want to spend in this video. Maybe someday I'll kind of run through the journey that I've taken. From an electronic music perspective, I grew up enjoying the more atmospheric moments of bands like Pink Floyd and King Crimson, and in jazz as well, and always wondered, hey, are there bands, or is there a way you could just do that part of the music without the singing and the you know, the more complex progressive elements to it. And then I discovered, yes, there were bands at that time. Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schulze, Kraftwerk and bands like that came a little later. And so that's kind of how I got into it. But when I was growing up, synthesizers, keyboards, we're talking the late 60s and the 70s, were extremely expensive. It wasn't until they were mass produced in the 80s, the Yamaha DX7 and the Roland D50, where instruments got a little more affordable. I started on synths in the 90s, and you know, again, back to the price of the Mellotron. Keyboards, workstations, synths were just as expensive as the Mellotron. It really was very difficult to get away unless you were getting these little general MIDI modules to effectively get some good sounds at you know, cheap price. You really had to pay for that. So I was lucky in the 90s that there were a lot of labels looking for electronic music. I was signed to a label called Mindspore, who put out my first CD, recorded that under the name Synthetic Block because that label wanted me to use a pseudonym. And then subsequent labels, the same thing. Gears of Sand, I had some CDs on. And then I did go back to my own name when I had some releases on Hypnos. And you know, it was really because of that first CD that I was able to get other labels interested. But those days have passed. It's real difficult to get signed and get music put out there, so I rely on streaming, and you can find links to my music in the description below, and YouTube as well. But I'll save that for the final question. All right, so let's get back to jamming. I'm going to use the Mellotron M400 cello sound for this bit. So the final question, and it's as much comments as questions, is more around of, hey, there, you could be doing this or you could be doing that to make your videos better. I recognize some people, that's what they do for a living, so they're soliciting work. And those are true comments. I did not get into this to make high quality professional videos and do this from, to monetize the videos and make a living at it. Every video that I do, I learn a little more about how to make videos. I learn a little more about how to have a better sound. But this is where I make music. This is the studio portion of my house. So I'm not trying to fake anything. Yeah, I could black out the windows and all that. Maybe someday I'll be more interested in doing that. But right now, I'm really interested in sharing music and working with music and interacting with anyone who watches and listens from the music perspective. So still open to any kind of comments like that to make the videos better, not intentionally trying to make videos that aren't of a high quality, but that's not really my first motivation, so it really is about the music. As I mentioned in the last answer for the previous question, I was lucky enough to have CDs put out. That's not really a valid way, although, hey, people put out vinyl, people put out cassettes, and even 8 tracks these days. So it's a lot more open and free with the way that you can get music out there. But I like using YouTube because it's really immediate. I do a couple of videos a week, typically an improv, and then the other video is a walk through that improv. And that's really the bit that I enjoy doing. I like making music and I like interacting with people around that. So not to say that this is going to be the space in the house where I'm always making the videos, but at some point I may excuse the cat here who just can't stay away from me when I'm making videos. But for now, it really is about the music. Okay, this cat's not going to go anywhere. So let me get back to the jamming. For this particular jam, I'm going to use the violin and the cello sound. I'll have them layered, still using the effects for Mixbox. So just a short little jam today and answering some questions I got. I appreciate everyone who watches and listens to the video, anyone who subscribes. If you've just stopped by and you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing to my channel, liking a video or two, or hitting that bell icon to get notified anytime I put new content out there. I really do appreciate any of the comments and any questions that people have. I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And at the end of the day, when you're making music, it can be really difficult. It can be frustrating. So if there's not an element of fun to it, it really does become a drag really quick. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And good luck with your own music.